My name is Davies. Today I want to talk about spirituality, the real core of this series of talks that I'm giving. In the last talk we talked about consciousness and defined it as when the human brain was acting on with all three components of time, the real, the unreal and the imaginary. In the past we have also used the Trinitarian equation, composed of all these three aspects, to describe other aspects of life. In particular, we looked at mortality in Schrödinger's cat. You might recall that we said that the perceived mortality of a cat was n squared plus minus n squared plus in squared, and we got the answer that it was plus or minus n, which in other words meant that the cat was subject to either a real and unreal mortality, which was alive and dead. We can see from the equation that the answers here are actually included in the equation. So we have the real, go back to the time equation, we have real time, unreal time, and in an imaginary time which we have equated with the future. But what of mortality? What of the imaginary mortality aspect? What does that mean? What does that entail? And are there other traits that we can treat similarly with the Trinitarian equation? What traits would they be? Well, luckily, helps at hand here in the Holy Bible. It tells us in Ecclesiastes verse 3, there is a time for everything and a season for every activity under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot. It goes on and on, there's about a dozen or so lines, but it ends with a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. So let's look at the penultimate one of those in a little bit more detail. Let's look at love. Written out in the Trinitarian equation form, we have the perceived love is plus or minus the square root of real love, unreal love, and imaginary love terms. I hope you can make this out. I'm sorry that the recordings are not really good enough, to be honest, but anyway, it's the best I can do. And we come to the conclusion, having worked it out exactly as before, that the perceived love is now plus or minus love. The plus one equates to love, and the minus one hate. Exactly the conclusions drawn in Ecclesiastes, which I think is very telling and comes back to what I've said many times before, that the Bible is the source of many great truths. But what then, if the plus and the minus refer to love and hate, what does the imaginary love term equate to? Well, I think it's simply down to man's innate spirituality. This is where all our traits, such as altruism, courage, all these derive from man's innate spirituality, and our love of the arts, how we appreciate and actually do art. And we've been doing it from quite a long time. I mean, I think it started with Cro-Man in Man about 100,000 years ago. We started doing wonderful drawings, making fine implements, finer tools. Schopenhauer, the German philosopher, said that art takes man out of his material body, out of time and space, out of empiricism. And I think he's right. It also allows us to divine gods. And it is that I want to turn to in our next talk.